This hour, we're going to be joined by ODM Secretary General Edwin SIFUNA, and we're looking at the intrigues of political parties in coalitions this morning and looking at the details of how these things all work out. A lot is happening in the country currently with the political situation and finding out. So then what happens to parties when we get into coalitions? And asking ourselves, all right, so with an agenda that a party had in the very beginning, what then happens as we move forward? And Edwin is here with us this morning. Thank you for joining us as you even sit down and get into the details of things. Edwin SIFUNA, good morning.
Good morning. I come bearing gifts.
Apparently, and yes. This is a good thing. What is this now?
That is the promise that the Azimio la Umoja has made to the people of Kenya. We are hoping that we can have a conversation about issues and facts.
Yes.
As opposed to the usual politics where people latch on to something that somebody said and it becomes the discussion that then derails the entire conversation about what we are supposed to be doing for the country.
It is very glossy.
Yes.
It's very glossy.
It's and only the best for you. Only the best for you.
Oh, this is very nice.
Yeah.
The question is that beyond the gloss and the pomp and circumstance, the things that are within this document,
even whatever is within is as glossy as the material on which it is printed. So I can assure you that we mean well. I don't see my friend.
Your friend is doing what I like to call a walkabout.
Oh, okay.
He does that every now and then.
Oh, okay.
So when he comes back, we will ask him the details of these places where he went.
That's nice. I don't want to be told that he's running away from me. I love our little talks.
Far from it. Edwin, it's good to see you.
It's
been a minute since you've been here. There's been a lot that's been going on. So welcome once again to the hot seat.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. As I told you, it's my favorite radio studio in the country.
Say it louder.
This is my favorite radio studio in the country. I think it's the only one that could have in-studio guests during COVID because, you can see that the environment is quite friendly.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking about a friendly environment, the country is in the throes of the political campaign, the political season. And you as ODM, there are many things you specifically as Edwin said. There are many things that you push for in terms of party politics and party position.
Yeah.
And now you're in a coalition whereby there are at least 25 other parties who have a say in what is going to happen as concerns this coalition. Is the voice of ODM being drowned out?
I don't think so. I don't think it is physically possible to drown out the voice of ODM because we are a very powerful voice. We are a party that has a very long history and people know what we are about and what we stand for. We have been brought together by all these other political parties that share in the vision that, in fact, Kenya faces an existential threat. That if we don't put aside our individual comforts, our individual differences, our individual fears, then we will all be on the same evacuation plane when we are seeking asylum should this country land in the hands of the wrong people. So that primary concern for the welfare of the nation is bigger than the concern for the voice of ODM. We will always have our space. I am happy that we have donated our party leader to now be Baba ya kila mtu.
For everybody.
Yes, he's everybody's Baba now. And we are not jealous. We are happy to share him. For years, we have told people that there are very many good things about this Baba of ours. And we are happy to share with them so that they get to experience what are these things we've been saying about Mzee Raila Odinga all these years that people probably have not gotten to experience. I am more than happy to see the sitting order change. That in fact, the seat next to Raila is not a reserve of SIFUNA. Let somebody else get to sit with him, to talk to him, to get to experience him. Because we already know him as ODM. We know what he is about. And we are more than happy to share him. He is the only person in Azimio la Umoja who's not allowed to call for 6-piece voting. But for me as ODM Secretary General, whenever I go, it is my primary duty to actually ask the voters to give ODM votes. So there is no contradiction in that. We are grateful that we are seeing things that we thought would never happen. Mzee is being accepted in places that he thought were no-go zones. We are making friends with people who would never countenance.
But you would have
being
never
seen in
sat at the
public.
same table together.
No, not that we would not have sat the table together. People used to flee when Raila checks in, you know, because he was being treated like a leper. It used to break our hearts because we knew that this was a good man. But because of the politics of hate that had been preached in the past, many people would see him and just flee, you know. So we are happy that we are seeing things in our lifetimes that we never thought we would see. That the country has become open, that everybody can be able to open their eyes, their ears, their hearts to a new message, a message that you ordinarily are not used to listening to.
Is there fair play, Edwin? And I ask this when I'm talking in relation to parties and the zoning issues that we've heard about or that we see taking place, of which some people have even said, you know, forget it, I'm not even going to be part of this, I'm going to find my home somewhere else. The zoning issues where certain areas then are the preserve of certain people. What is happening with that? And can every party really equally hold its own within this coalition without, you know, direct support, as it were, from the powers that be?
I think it has been a very painful process. Myself, I have been part of that particular process. It is something to be expected that when you are in as big a family as Azimio is, I don't think anyone has ever put together a coalition on the scale of Azimio where you have 25, 27 political parties, and that everybody is contributing to everybody, at least deserves some consideration when it comes to the sharing of positions, as you said. So in Nairobi, for instance, what informed the decision on zoning is the traditional strength of political parties. As the Secretary General of ODM, because I know the voting patterns, the demographics of the constituencies in Nairobi, for instance, I know that my candidate, even if I insisted on a candidate, say in Roysambu constituency or in Kasarani or in Starehe, they would struggle. Those candidates on an ODM ticket would struggle because of those factors that I have laid, and even an examination of the voting patterns for the last donkey years. So it is based on consideration of all these factors that we say that probably because we are in a coalition, it would be safer for us as ODM to support the Jubilee candidate in Roysambu, for instance, and pour in whatever little support we can to ensure that they actually beat the UDA candidate. And City, you will remember that we have lost seats in this city in the past because of failure to have that conversation. Langata is a classic example that, in fact, in 2017, we as ODM lost Langata because our partners refused to have that conversation, ending up in Nixon Korir beating the ODM candidate by, say, 1,000 votes. It was about 980 votes. And yet we had coalition partners in Wiper who are getting 5,000 votes at the ballot, you know. So this conversation is necessary to have. The most painful conversation we have had in Nairobi is with regards to the gubernatorial seat.
Yes.
That in fact we in ODM believe that Nairobi is largely ODM. And again, this is based on the voting patterns for the last donkey years. Raila Odinga has always carried Nairobi. And this is fact. You can look at the statistics. That in 2007, he beat Mwai Kibaki in Nairobi. In 2013, he beat Uhuru Kenyatta and Ruto in Nairobi. 2017, the same thing. He got more votes than the president here in Nairobi. That would translate to a very solid support for ODM and its candidates here in Nairobi. And for us to be asked to step down our candidate for governor, Honorable Tim Wanyonyi, who we believed actually represented the best hope for Nairobians because of his experience, his ability to be able to have conversations in a very sober and serious manner, especially when you juxtapose it to the past 4 years, what has happened. So we felt it, and the ODM support still feel it to this day, that we actually ceded that particular ground. But that's what we are talking about. It is very serious give and take within the coalition. We were lucky enough to be allocated the slot of Senate and women representative, and I was lucky to be that candidate for Azimio. We also know that there were people in Jubilee, like my brother Commander, who also had expressed an interest in being the senator candidate for Azimio, but he actually stepped down for me, and I continue to remain grateful. So this is a very difficult conversation to have. But what has happened, I use the example of Nairobi because it's the easiest for me to explain, is that we now have a team. We have a solid team where Jubilee has candidates in 8 constituencies that are being supported by all the political parties in Azimio. We have candidates in 8 constituencies which traditionally vote ODM that are being supported even by the Jubilee supporters and the other political parties in Azimio. And then Embakasi South, just where we are down the road, we agreed that we leave that to the Wiper candidate. By the way, even in Embakasi South, there were very strong ODM candidates, and it was a very, very difficult conversation to have. Across the country, you go to places like Trans Nzoia, where we had a candidate for governor, and he was stepped down on the podium by Mzee himself and told, we're going to support Natembea for this particular seat so that we can beat the Kenya Kwanza Alliance. Across the country, there are those conversations being had, but there are places where it is difficult for that agreement to be reached as quickly as people would like to see. So it is not about unfairness. It is a consideration of the fact that you are now part of a bigger family, and that conversation of give and take is going to benefit everyone and the coalition generally.
You make it sound like a genuine brotherhood, and that everybody then who is coming into the coalition can understand and let down your position for somebody else. But we know this to be that politics is not as kumbaya and nice as you're making it seem.
It is not kumbaya. I've tried to paint the picture of political parties making very difficult decisions. It is not all rosy. I've told you it was a very difficult decision, for instance, for us to accept to step down Tim Wanyonyi, because every analysis, every poll that we ran was showing that he had the best chances against any other person. And again, just his history, he has been a councillor in this city, he has been a member of parliament for, I think, 2 terms, and he has the experience and the sobriety that was needed and required to be able to bring back this city to where it was before. So it is not a rosy conversation to have. People's careers, ambitions, aspirations are being swept aside in the interest of the coalition. But again, we draw comfort from the assurances from the presidential flag bearer that in fact there is going to be accommodation for everyone once we form government. Everybody is useful. Yeah.
You know, if you look at coalition governments around the world, there are those who argue that they offer a certain sense of stability. But if you just take the example of just how volatile coalitions can be once they're in power, and the power that not even the bigger parties, but the smaller parties that enable the bigger parties to be in place, how much sway they hold, because the moment they withdraw from that coalition, everything is in turmoil. But anyway, our political structure, I think, is stable even if a government is formed and a coalition partner decided to pull away. What we see in the West would not actually happen here. But the question that I find at the foremost of my mind with regards to everything we're saying, we're heading towards the formation of a new government. The one thing that has been the bane of our existence has been a demonstration of a clear disregard for the rule of law by those who've been in power, and attempts at, but by and large, and I'm looking at how that has spread and has become the norm, where we've normalized the disregard for the law. We call it impunity.
Yeah.
What does this Azimio government say they are going to do to ensure that we make the rule of law the normal?
Yeah, I think, Cinti, the answer in to your question lies in who are these Azimio people. I believe that the history of people, their schooling, their socialization, who they are in the past informs how they are going to behave in the future. We have put out this manifesto that Ndu calls glossy on one assumption, that Kenyans are generally good people, that they will then proceed to elect good people to office, that those good people in office will put in place good governance that will then result in good opportunities and services to people. And that if those good opportunities and services to the people do not work for everyone, there are certain social safety nets that are put in place to ensure that nobody falls below a certain level. So the goodness of Kenyans is first the biggest assumption in this document. We have rejected the invitation, City, by some of our opponents to accept that, for instance, breaking the law, that impunity, that corruption, that this bad manners is generally what Kenyans are about. That in fact, given an opportunity, you would do the very same thing that you are talking against today. We reject that premise that in fact Kenyans, and to many of us, values still matter, that integrity still matters, that in fact if you have these good people in office, then we are going to be able to deliver these things. Number one, if you look at the ticket that we have put together, it should speak to something without you being told what Martha Karua or what Raila Odinga would do in a certain situation. You have a reference. You know these people. You know what they're about. You know their histories. There are people in this country who are very uncomfortable discussing their history because your past is who you are. This is what you're made of. If you are a DO in the 90s, clobbering activists who are trying to expand the democratic space, that's who you are. You're not going to run away from it. You know, they say history is already written and the ink is dry. Our assurance is that it doesn't matter what promises people make to you. It is critical to examine who is making that promise.
So are we saying that it doesn't matter what is being said, Edwin? Because there's a
No,
lot.
it matters what
There's a lot that's
is being said.
There's
but
a lot
it
that's being
matters
said.
more.
So you're saying it matters more the
It
person
matters
that is saying
absolutely.
it based on
Absolutely.
based on what this individual
Absolutely.
has
Who
done
he
in the
is.
past.
Who is he?
Who he or she is.
Yes.
What they've done in the past then is what is going to accelerate the promise.
Absolutely. No, not that it's going to accelerate it. It's going to anchor the promise. You can believe that this thing is going to be done. Like City, I have said here before, we in ODM, for instance, have a history. An ODM government is least likely to disobey a court order because of the people in ODM. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I have a history. I have suffered the brunt of people ignoring court orders. You go to court, you have 15 odd court orders to secure Miguna's release, and they just refuse to follow the court order. That impunity that you're talking about. I don't see people who have fought for the independence of the judiciary, people who have fought for the sanctity and upholding of the law, people like Korengo, people like Nyongo, people who are essentially the pillars of ODM, allowing a situation like that to prevail. So my short answer is that the promise is as good as the person who's making the promise. We have a history here of people talking about things and having opportunity to actually deliver on those things and doing nothing about it. I saw our opponents launching what they called a women charter. And even the promises in that charter were a bit ridiculous. For instance, they said they want to ensure that spousal consent in land transaction is going to be enforced. That's already the law. How do you come to promise as something that is already on the books? You talk about sanitary towels for women. That is the same promise you made in 2013. I mean, 9 years down the line, you should be making new promises. You have already had opportunity to be able to deal with these issues.
Or at the very least, admit that maybe you weren't able to do it before.
Absolutely. At the very least, say, these are the challenges that I faced, and that now this is the new approach that I'm going to take. But you can't make the same promise that you made in 2013, and yet you have no evidence whatsoever of any attempt to even meet that promise that you made. You talk about having half your cabinet go to women. You have had opportunity. Yeah? They say that when they got in 2013, they were co-presidents. He got an opportunity to select half of the cabinet. His half or quarter of cabinet should have been women, you know. And we are talking about giving opportunity to women to be able to attain the highest possible aspiration in their lives. Women have been cabinet secretaries before. It is not an inspiration for you to tell us you're going to give women cabinet positions. The one thing they have never been is deputy president or president. There is only one coalition that is offering that. And in fact, the most interesting thing is that of the 4 candidates who've been cleared, there's only one who has refused to have a woman as a running mate. Even those who are, being considered as jokers are serious enough to be able to have women running mates, but not Ruto.
I see you being very careful about that last statement that you made, Edwin. I mean, we're going to go to a break in a short bit, but here, look, in a coalition where it would look as though there are those who are joining the coalition for what they can get out of it.
Yeah.
Can we say with certainty that those who have joined this coalition are of the same mind with which you're so vehemently advocating for right now? Are they of the same mind? I'm just going to look at 4.6, public service delivery. That's just one aspect of this promise of delivery. increased awareness of the prevalence of rent-seeking behavior by public officers, politicization of service delivery, and abuse of bureaucratic procedures in the provision of services. Just that one. That is on page 74. Just
Yes.
that one. Can we unequivocally say that everybody who's in this coalition is of that mind? Because there will be people, regardless of who takes the day, there will be people who are put in positions who will be in office. Can you say that without a doubt, everybody's on the same mind on just one of these things?
Let me put it like this. The person that you put as the president sends a certain signal that there are certain things that are not going to be tolerated. I was having a conversation with some ambassadors, and I told them, for instance, if you hear that Marie Le Pen has been elected the French president, you don't need to ask what French foreign policy is going to be. You know who she is.
Yes.
You know, there are certain subtle messages that are sent depending on the person that is elected. If you elect somebody who is known for corruption, for instance, what message does that send to the lower cadres in the public service? What we are saying, and yesterday's newspaper, you saw what the Auditor General was saying, that in fact there's a lot of wastage in government. We are paying rent for our ambassador in the US, yet there is a house that was built and completed almost 10 years ago. Those things, for them to end and to stop, it has to be communicated from the person who's at the top, that this is not something that we are going to countenance. All of us in Azimio, I can tell you, understand that the two biggest problems that we have to deal with, number one is the cost of living, and number two is unemployment. If we are going to be able to put together a team that understands this, and it starts from the top, the person you elect then communicates what this government is going to be about. If you elect Martha Karua as the deputy president, it does not communicate the same to the lower civil service as electing Rigathi Gachagua as the deputy president.
Let's take a break on that note.
Something else.
Let's take a break on that note and come back and continue this conversation. Secretary General of the Orange Democratic Movement in as our guest on the hot seat today, talking about, what it portends in the future politically in this country.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
And we're joined by Secretary General of the ODM, Edwin SIFUNA, with us today, and discussing issues politics in the situation in which the country is now politically, and talking coalitions. And I think the big thing now is the promises. What Kenyans should believe. What is the intent? CT has a question to
look at
that.
this book, there's a column that I really like. Our commitment. Essentially, we're being told, you can hold us to account.
Absolutely. And we are getting more and more in our politics to a space where people will ask you about the things that you said. As Ndu said, if you encounter any challenges on the way to fulfilling the promises that you have made, at the very minimum, you need to explain to the country that these are the challenges that we face in delivery of this. We got this program to X percentage. We face this challenge, and we are hoping that if we do this differently, we'll be able to get it to 100%. But what we are seeing is people who just forget that they have made promises to us before. They have not fulfilled those promises, and they come and make, if not the same promises, even new promises without any accountability. From the Azimio side, I can assure you that we would want to be held to account to the promises that we are making. We have understood the assignment, my brother City, that in fact, across the country, and this document is actually a product of the engagements that we have had. We have seen our brothers on the other side also convene this, what they are calling economic forums. Been there, done that. I mean, they say that imitation is the best form of flattery. We are flattered. But this is a product of an engagement that we have had across the country. When we went to up North Rift, for instance, City, you remember there was a very serious conversation about agriculture and agricultural produce, and how farmers were suffering with their produce in their stores, rotting, and yet there are people importing maize. In this document, we have made a commitment that there will be no importation of grain, for instance, until we have exhausted purchases from local farmers that are in the stores. And this is not something we conjured up ourselves. It was that conversation that we had in Eldoret, that in fact people have been frustrated. There are farmers who spend donkey months on the farm, put out their produce, and when they take it to the National Cereals and Produce Board, they find trucks za wazito mbele yao kwa line, and your produce is not taken because somebody else is taken. So we want to be held to account to the promises that we are making here. Kenyans are really suffering. The cost of living is unbearable. We have made a promise here to review the tax regime to ensure that at least we look at the cost of food, the cost of fuel, the cost of electricity. we'll go back to that question of good people city. If you look at, for instance, power purchase agreements that have been signed with Kenya Power, those cannot be agreements that were signed by good people. I can assure you that is not somebody who was a good person doing a good deed for the good people of Kenya. How can you sign an agreement with people to say, okay, this guy is going to produce very expensive electricity using diesel engines, and that you people must pay whether you take it or you don't, and that it is susceptible to all the fluctuations of currency, the fluctuations of the prices of oil, and we end up, if you buy tokens of 100 shillings for your studio here, up to 40 shillings, bwana, is going to taxes and levies.
It is.
It's unacceptable, you know. So what we are saying is we must review the taxation regime to be able to cushion Kenyans from the high cost of living. I would have loved, and I had made this proposal to the team, it was not taken up, to even review the taxation bans, that if somebody is making, say, less than 30,000 shillings, we remove them from the taxation ban, and that we make pay as you earn. The maximum pay that people should pay it should be about 20%. Let people earn money after you've gotten them jobs and keep that money in their pockets for them to be able to grow their lot, you know.
Actually,
so
improve the circulation of money.
absolutely. So these are things that you can always hold me to account. And you know me, City, we are not afraid to come back here in the next 3 months when we will be in power. You can ask us these questions. If within 100 days we are not able to deliver any meaningful change, we will be here to be able to answer to Kenyans when they ask us these questions.
Essentially, you're offering us a social contract.
It is a very serious contract.
This is the
City.
thing, Edwin, because I'm going to stick to this point. This stuff is written down. This stuff is written down in a manner that probably we have not seen,
Yes.
you know, in the last, maybe even longer.
We have not seen.
We have not
just
seen.
leave it that. Where we
Right?
see this thing
Ever.
where we see
we've
it
not
evidence is in government policy.
Right.
But to be crystallized by
This is
a party,
crystallized. It's put down.
Yes.
People, you're handing it out like you're handing out candies at the spring fair.
Yeah.
It is there. People will be able to look through the pages on each and every
Absolutely.
thing. Perchance should the Azimio coalition come into government.
Yes.
From the presidency down to the MCA level.
Yes.
This stuff is in ink, like
Absolutely.
you said.
Absolutely.
And people will be able to say, you said you would do this. This is
Absolutely.
not easy stuff, Edwin. There's a
Absolutely.
lot of things in here
Yeah,
across
one of
board.
the things that I have encountered.
Can we
in the-
actually say that without doubt, if anything here is not done, it will not be for the purposes of conversation that we say, oh, right, you said you were going to do this and you didn't do this, and then that conversation flies out the window, but that truly Kenyans will be able to come and hold to account and say, guys,
Absolutely.
you promised that you would do this.
That
and
is
it's not
why
been done.
that is why we have accountability mechanisms within our political structure to be able to hold people to account. One of the things that I have encountered, even just having conversation about this document, is our biggest challenge is the mental block that Kenyans have. First, they have been lied to so many times. I mean, people have been giving promises and brazenly breaking those promises to an extent where Kenyans are resigned to almost accept that this is how politics is played, that people will put out all this glossy stuff, get your vote, and then just abandon everything, and there's nothing that you can do. That is the biggest mental block that I have experienced. Number two, we have been conditioned to accept our state of affairs as the norm. This is what you are talking to about City. And I've encouraged people that, in fact, many of us who are younger might not relate. But there are people who were born when this country used to work. There was a time when you could go to a bus station or a bus stop and you knew the bus would be there at 7:15.
and it came at
And it
7:50.
came at 7:15. There used to be a time when the public health centers, you would go there knowing you would find a doctor and that there would be medicine in the cabinet. Is it not true,
It is
City?
absolutely
There
true.
was a time when you used to have water as something you used to
It
take.
was normal.
Yes, it
for
was
water
normal for
water
water
to be come from a tap.
correct from a tap, and you were able to drink that water,
Actually,
even
yes.
from fountains in town. This is a country that people have forgotten. This is something that the generation of people who have been born, especially in the late 90s and the early 2000s, they have been conditioned to accept that it is okay for you to stay for a week without running water in your house. That uko na mtu wako wa mkokoteni, that you have mtu wako wa punda mwenye utapigia simu akuletee maji. So the biggest problem that we are facing selling this manifesto is the mental block that Kenyans have because of what society has conditioned them to believe. That first of all politicians are the same. And we are saying we are not the same.
How do Kenyans reconcile the two when you are today, I mean, you can't blame Kenyans completely.
No, we're not blaming. We are accepting that there is a problem.
But here, Kenya, in a situation whereby on a daily basis, yesterday we had a conversation, on Monday we had a conversation where we're talking about the cost of living, just being alive on a daily basis, right? And then no sooner than that has happened, fuel then gets increased by another 9 shillings, and people are wondering, what on earth is going on here? How are you going to then be able to survive tomorrow? Because by golly, fuel has gone up. That means food, which was already bloody expensive, is then even going to go up much higher.
Yeah.
So Kenyans are asking, what are we going to do? Now, in the face of that, here comes a whole barrage of people who are telling you, put us in government and we'll make sure that the status quo changes.
Yeah. So I understand the frustration that Kenyans must face. What we're saying is that the people who are responsible for largely putting us where we are cannot be the ones to then come and claim to offer solutions. Look at the cost of food, for instance. We are supposed to be a full food sufficient nation. We have tried and we have made the promise here that in fact our dependence on rain-fed agriculture is something that has put us in this particular situation. Who knew that a war in some Eastern European country called Ukraine would actually affect the price of bread in Kenya? We live in a global village city, and we must accept that a war in Ukraine affects the price of palm oil from Indonesia, and that we depend on that palm oil from Indonesia to be able to, produce our own cooking oil here. So what are we supposed to do? We have made a proposal here to move away from rain-fed agriculture to concentrate largely on developing our arable land under irrigation. Now, what was the biggest challenge? It is obvious. I mean, that is the obvious solution. If there is climate change and rains are failing, you need to change to irrigation. Why hasn't that happened? Because of this monster called corruption. We had a proposal to develop Galana Kulalu. And you know the story of Galana Kulalu, that in fact the investor that we got, somebody from Israel, people who grow essentially everything in a desert, came and told us that they had never seen the level of corruption that they saw in Galana Kulalu, and they abandoned the project. What we are telling you, Ndu, is that the promise is as good as the person making the promise. And the person, you can ascertain how SIFUNA is going to behave given or based on how he has behaved in the past. When you have had small power like this, what did you do? Were you running down people in the Changa Dens villages, handing them over to the Moi regime for them to be tortured and detained without trial? Is that what you were doing in the 90s? Were you a leader of a youth wing of a political party that was averting the will of the people? That is who you are. So in any eventuality, in the unfortunate eventuality that this person is given the reins of power, if you see symptoms of a disease he acquired in the 90s showing up, you cannot blame him. That is who he is. That is who he is. So we are telling people that the commitment, the promises that are being made must be examined and juxtaposed to the person making the promises. I remember there was a time when Raila told people that we could actually have bypasses in Nairobi. People, because of the mental block, they didn't see how it could happen. So there is this big person who has already acquired the Southern Bypass and built his palatial home. 2 regimes, city. One, the Minister of Roads gets on a tinga and brings down this person's house, and the road is built. In another regime, people have acquired the Southern Bypass. It is too difficult to get them out there. We go for the easier solution of excising part of our national park to build the road. People are not the same. Politicians are not the same. If you hand power to people with credibility, people who have a history of fighting for these things over a period of time, the communication through the ranks of civil and public service is subliminal. It doesn't have to be said that there is a new sheriff in town. There's going to be a change in the way we do things. We have Kenyans suffering. Look at the wastage in government. Look at the theft in government. It is possible for us to cushion Kenyans from the high prices of commodities, and even from the some of them that are being caused by global geopolitics that we have nothing to do about, if we just deal with our internal issues. So I am hoping, City, that I will be sitting here in the next 100 days and we will be talking about the changes that you have seen. The changes that you have seen. The reason that our taxation is so high is known. Is because we have to pay the debts that we took. We took these debts, and debt in itself, we have been told, is not bad. But where did the money go? If you have your own Auditor General telling you that from the Eurobond, $2 billion that we borrowed, he cannot see which program the money went to. I mean, surely, Kenyans, what are we doing? What are we doing?
You know, what you've just displayed is an amazing ability to explain a position you favor. You know, in other spheres, I would say that, and by the way, this is in the most positive way. I would say, as a Secretary General, you are an excellent spin doctor, because
It's not spin. It's the truth.
spin is not negative. It has acquired a negative tinge to it over time, but spin refers to perspective.
Okay.
Okay? Because it cannot be denied that this particular government has carried on with Kibaki's legacy and continued building roads. There's no question about it.
Yes.
The roads exist. The express highway exists. We see it. There are plans they've tried to put on the pillars. That's a different story, because those things aren't working.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
There are many things that we say have not worked, dams that haven't been built. But there are dams that have been built. They have been even completed.
Yes.
There are projects that haven't quite gotten to what we heard they would be. Stadia being a case in point.
Yes.
Now, I've seen the promise and I've seen the commitment. Is there a commitment that you will continue with the projects that were envisioned? Is there a promise that you will be more vocal and more communicative? I know you've said we'll be talking about this, but communication is not just about what you plan to do, because that's what politicians do. They talk about what they want to do. And this booklet here talks about what you want to do.
Yes.
Blow by blow.
Yes.
How frequently will you update the nation on the programs you have and where you have reached with each and everyone? Will the ministers be giving us a state of the ministry, just as we talk about the state of the nation, and telling us of the things we said we are going to do, this is what we have done? You talked about the issues that may arise. Yes, we've tried, we've moved. And if you don't, how do you expect us to hold you to account?
So City, here is a promise that, in fact, for us, and I'll go back to what I told you about good people putting in place good governance. Good governance requires that there is direct engagement with the people, a respect of the rule of law, there is public participation and all these things. We had proposed under the discussion of BBI to enhance this reporting mechanism that you're talking about, that in fact the system that we have does not work. So that you have a provision for the president to speak to the Article 10 values once every year in a joint address to Parliament. The ministers themselves, there is actually no mechanism for you to have this conversation with them. There was a proposal to bring these people back to Parliament as the representatives of the people, for you to be able on a daily basis when Parliament is in session. I mean, if you look at what happens in the UK, which is a proper parliamentary system, the Prime Minister is before the people's representatives as often as weekly, you know? So you are able to then give this progress on a daily basis. And when issues emerge, you are before the representative of the people frequently enough for you to be able to have that conversation. What we can commit, and I can say this authoritatively, because the presidential candidate, our president, Raila Odinga, has said it, that in fact projects that have been begun and money that has already been sunk in those projects would not be lost by us abandoning those projects wherever it is they are. They should be able to be completed. And there are not many projects. What we don't want is a focus on the shiny things. There are no laptops in this document. There are no stadiums in this document. In fact, we are so modest when it comes to sporting facilities. We have said we are going to upgrade the mini sporting facilities in the estates, in the cities. Here in Nairobi, a ground like Kihumbuini ground in Westlands, or the empty lot in Githurai 44 that has been is just a patch of dust, or even the one we were in Undugu grounds the last time. Those small patches, what we're talking about is we don't want projects that will require us to suck up more public money and public debt for us to be able to finance shiny projects that then make people feel nice that they have done this and they have done that. We're going to invest in the people. Okay. When this manifesto is heavy on encouraging investment in primary manufacturing, people ask us, where are you going to get the money for this? If we are talking about having one industry in one county, it is not going to be built by the government. You see, an industry that manufactures Toyota vehicles in China, The industry said the plant itself does not care whether it is in Guangzhou or it is in Kitinda, in my village in Bungoma. You know, you as a government put in place the proper systems and structures to be able to encourage these people. What is it that made Daimler to move their plant from Stuttgart to produce Mercedes-Benz in China? What is it? You know, so that is exactly what we are talking about. And we, when people ask us, oh, have you costed this manifesto? How much is it going to cost us? What is it going to cost you to communicate to the investing public across the world that in fact there is a paradigm shift, that it is going to be easier for you to set up business, that we are going to eliminate these pit stops that are essentially corruption collection points for you to be able to start operating your manufacturing plant. When you hear stories of somebody wanting to set up a clinker plant in Kitui and running away because from the time he lands at JKIA, the guy who's handling his baggage, to the chief of the area, to the MCA, to the MP, everybody wants a cut. There are people in government, senior people in government, telling him, I have to own 40% of your business for you to set up. And somebody runs off to Tanzania. I am telling you that these things have to change. And when they change, we will be able to generate enough revenue for us to be able to support the programs that we have put in place or we are promised.
Edwin, in a minute, there are things that are hotting up in Nairobi.
Yes.
Obviously, you're running for the senatorial seat in Nairobi. There are many things that are happening at the moment. IEBC is being asked to be very clear about what their position is. I mean, things about degrees are flying in and out. What's the position of the party and the coalition?
Well, it is quite unfortunate what is happening. There used to be a time we used to go to school to acquire knowledge. Now people are going to school to acquire certificates for them to be cleared to run. It's ridiculous. You know, it's ridiculous. And where do people get this guile? You know very well you're not qualified for the position you're looking for. Where do you summon the strength to even show up for the interview? This is the impunity that we are talking about, City. I'm telling you for a fact that if somebody went to school, you would tell they went to school by how even they speak about the schools they went to. You would know what that school is. There are people who are running to some backwater institutions to bring us certificates, to claim that they are degree certificates. Immediately they tell you the name of the school. You should know. You just know. We know what is going on. That person did not go to that school for any education that is worth talking about. It is a document acquired specifically for election purposes, you know? And this is what we want Kenyans to understand and do. At the end of the day, people look to political parties. Why can't ODM stop so and so? Why can't IEBC stop so and so? The primary responsibility for us to protect our institutions, for us to protect the Constitution, rests upon us. I would love a day to come that even if all the wash guys are cleared to run, Kenyans at the ballot just say, we know this one is wash. No. We know this one is a fake degree. No. We know this one. That is the country we are looking for. We should never outsource that primary responsibility to be the vanguards of the Constitution and the institutions and the country that we want to see. So I'm hoping that Nairobians will see through this charade. Even if these charlatans are cleared to run, they should not be allowed office. It's that simple, you know? So for me, as SIFUNA, I am asking for votes as Senator of Nairobi on the basis of Chapter 6. I said there are 3 guidelines only for election in this country. Is the person suitable for the office they are looking for? Is he competent to do the job that he's looking for? And does he have personal integrity? Tukiangalia hiyo vitu tatu peke yake, we will get the leaders we want.
That we deserve.
Yeah, and that is what is in the Constitution. So people sit and say and cry, oh, we have abandoned Chapter 6. But the criteria is there in black and white. Is SIFUNA competent to be a senator? Am I suitable for the position? Umewahi sikia mahali ati niko na kesi ya chief nimepiga bibi?
Those are the questions that should
Those are the questions that should be asked.
Edwin SIFUNA, Secretary General of the Orange Democratic Movement, always a pleasure to have you with us and looking at some of these issues. It'll be interesting to see how things unfold in the coming days, and wishing you all the best for sure. And we hope to continue conversations with you regularly.
I am always available. You can ask me as many questions as frequently as you want, especially once I'm elected as your senator. I will be a public servant answerable to you.